everyone! Today I wanted to review the latest book that I finished reading, and that is Girl at War by Sara Nović. This was one of the books that was on my list of books I definitely wanted to read in 2017. It was one of those books that I just had a good vibe about. I had a feeling I was probably really gonna like it. I hadn't heard too much about it before I read it, but what I had heard really intrigued me. It follows Ana, who, when the story opens, is living in Zagreb in 1991. So as the Yugoslavian Civil War is starting to become a thing, she is a tomboy. She enjoys running around all of Zagreb with her best friend Luka and getting, into mischief and whatnot, but you can kind of see how things change as the war starts to creep in, how her family is affected, how her friends and their families are affected. We also time jump and focus on Ana when she is living in Manhattan in 2001. Now, for anybody who's of a certain age, you will know what happens in Manhattan in 2001, the 9/11 attacks. The 9/11 attacks remind Ana of everything that she went through in Croatia, everything that she left behind, and she decides to return to wrap up loose ends and figure out what happened to people and just get some closure. That is a very brief overview. This book packs a serious, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking punch. I think I preferred reading about 10-year-old Ana when she was in Zagreb and the surrounding areas. I think I preferred that because I liked the action and the tension that came from reading about Ana during wartime. That's not to say that the parts that were written about 20-year-old Ana weren't good and weren't well written and weren't intriguing in their own way, but they didn't have the same tension and build and what is going to happen that the sections, with 10-year-old Ana during wartime would have. I mean, that makes sense, right? Although this book is fiction, it almost reads like a memoir. The events that Ana went through are things that would have happened to somebody living in Zagreb during the Yugoslavian Civil War, feelings that somebody would have felt had they been in Manhattan during 9/11. I think that is what makes it so emotional and very interesting to read about. I don't think I've read another book that takes place in the Balkans during the Yugoslavian Civil War, and although I do know things about that war, I feel like it's often overlooked because it happened so recently. It is something I want to read more about, but I do understand that it is a very complicated thing, and as someone who doesn't have any relatives that live there, was not directly affected by that war, reading the book was helpful, though I know that there's so many things that I was missing because a lot of it was told from the perspective of a 10-year-old, so I'm not getting all of the necessary details for someone who is trying to maybe learn a lot from this. I definitely learned something, but it is at its heart a fiction novel about one person's experience and her childhood experience, and then going back 10 years later and seeing what the country has become while she's been gone. This edition, by the way, is beautiful. Ignore the yellow stripe at the bottom, but the cover designer, who is Kelly Blair, she did an excellent job. I really love the woods and looking up at the sky. It does have some significance and tie to the story as well, which is always appreciated. Another thing that's nice about this edition is that not only is there a short interview with the author, there's a snippet that she wrote called Sara Nović on what it's like to be a deaf novelist. I was aware before reading this that she was deaf, but I kind of forgot before I actually picked up the book and read it, so I wasn't paying attention to how the subtleties of somebody being a deaf author might affect how they write dialogue or how they might observe something and how that translates into writing in a book. So reading that snippet at the end that she wrote was really fantastic because it made me reflect on what I had read and pick up on some of the subtleties that if you were not aware that she was a deaf author, you might not have noticed. I'm pretty sure this is the only book I've read by a deaf author. I'm not really aware of any. If you are aware of other deaf authors, feel free to leave, their names in the comments below. So if you have read Girl at War, let me know what you thought of it down below. As always, all of our links are in the doobly-doo. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.